this one's kind of a hard discussion for me, and you know this, and it has to do with death.
Uh-huh.
I would say that, well, first, your own death you always think about, right? But for some reason that doesn't bother me as much. I'm not afraid of
Your bed
dying.
as you get closer.
Yeah, as I get closer, I certainly am afraid of how it will be, perhaps the pain around it or the lack of control around it. But my biggest fear right now is losing my family. And I've had some scares recently
Yeah.
with my family. And one of the things that I feel about being your friend is that this is something that you are very familiar with in multiple ways and in tragic ways.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's very interesting because I find myself when I'm around you and this topic comes up, feeling apprehensive, feeling a little bit fearful, feeling a little bit like,
Really?
yeah, like just a little bit of anxiety around it for a number of different ways. One, it's hard to know anything about it unless you've experienced it. So this is one of those topics that is very difficult for me to, I have a lot of philosophical understanding, which is like, just cannot be a thing when you're dealing with something that can be so scary. And then I know you from a very deep level. You have a very deep understanding of it on an experiential level and a very deep understanding of it philosophically as you've, really worked through what it's meant for you to go through these things. So yeah, it's not a topic that I feel very comfortable with, and is a topic that kind of scares me.
So I had asked you, Jade, what are you afraid it will feel like? Or are you afraid will happen when, say, you lose your parents in particular?
Yeah, it's not a question I've ever, I think, really, what is it? Well, I can tell you some of what it feels like. I feel pretty in control and solid in my life. And I know, again, I know you'll push back on this because it's kind of a book answer, but I'll start there because this is the only way I know how to answer. At the end of my head, I go, I had a very solid upbringing. I had two solid, a solid father, solid mother, grew up with both of them. They gave me and reinforced in me and instilled in me this idea that I can do anything, that I'm capable, that allowed me to be strong and secure, and they're my strength. They're currently my best friends. And when I had an issue, they're two of the only people that I trust that I can go to and be like, I got this going on, and they can offer me counsel and show up for me. So I feel like when they go, my strength, and here's my fear, or not, no, it just came to me. Yeah. My fear is that I will literally lose my shit and fall apart and just be not able to function like many of the people I've often counseled.
And is that because you essentially will lose your cheerleading squad, the people who reinforce you when you're in your inner child place, or when you have insecure moments, that you're afraid that you won't be able to do that for yourself without their reassurance?
100%, that's it.
Huh.
100%.
We never talked about that that way.
That's definitely it. Because I feel like when I go through financial stuff, I go to my dad.
Yeah.
Like when I go through emotional stuff, I go to my mom.
Yeah.
The only other place I go, and I usually do go to this first, is myself. So I'm not quick to go to them. I go to myself first, but then they're my lifeline.
Yeah.
And if I'm honest, and I'm embarrassed about this, but if I'm honest, I don't allow anyone else to be my lifeline. So in a sense, my two lifelines will go away and I will feel adrift at sea, I think. And it scares me. It makes me feel like I will become something that is a shell of myself. I often said this to some of my closer friends, and I think I said this to you, that I'm afraid of, I always have it together for everyone, and I'm afraid I won't recognize myself. I'm afraid I'll lose my shit.
Yeah.
And not feel on solid ground.
Yeah, we've never talked about this way. And I guess that's one big difference between us. We have so much in common, but my dad passed away in 2021, and my mom is still here. But my parents, since I lived in Asheville, lived about 4.5 hours away. And my mom and I talk a lot. We have a great relationship. We're on great terms. We enjoy spending time together. But I don't lean on her in the way of reinforcing insecurities for the most part. What I do lean on her for is when I need someone just to listen. But I don't necessarily get, since mom, a lot of valuable feedback from her. Especially, and my father would have offered a ton of feedback, but I would have to spend a lot of time and energy deciphering between what's true to me and what's not, because we don't necessarily have the same viewpoint on things. And so it seems from what you're sharing that you feel that you have solid ground with your parents and that you have a lot of the same viewpoints on some of this and that they are emotionally aware and available for you.
100%. Although, what you did mention something interesting there, that with this idea of like when I go to them for advice, I am at a place in my life now where the advice isn't necessarily that valuable, right? If I
Yeah.
don't quite understand what I'm doing, they're
Yeah.
cheerleaders.
Yeah.
But what I think I have in them is unconditional love from them. So I do feel like they've got my back. That they're very present. They want to listen. They're very interested in my life.
Yeah.
And so it's that where I don't necessarily feel most everyone else. I have two brothers, two older brothers and an older sister. I'm the youngest. They're also straight points for me. It's like I know I could go to them if I really need help, but they're not individuals that I necessarily feel that sort of like just I'm in a safe place.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I don't have, and this is interesting. I mean, I guess I'm realizing I don't have a lot of safe places to go in my life. I have me,
Yeah.
and I've been told a lot of times, from different therapists and psychics and different people that I'm someone who has a capacity to go and create a safe place for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But that's impossible to do for that all the time. So I don't have the capacity anywhere else other than my mother and father. I don't trust that there's a safe place for me outside of them. And so I guess that would make sense. Maybe that's what I'm afraid of, that I would have to be vulnerable in a way with certain people in my life that I have not necessarily been, because I've always been the one who people come to when they're vulnerable, right? So I'm the place that people come and say, I need you, I need help, I offer counsel. And the only people I go counsel, I'm seeing a real weakness in this as we're starting at this conversation. When I need counsel, I don't feel like there's really anyone that I can go to other than my mother and father. And they don't, like your mom, it's not that the advice is so earth shaking, it's just that, Jade, we got you and you're safe.
Yeah, if I look on my relationship with my mother, when shit hits the fan, I know I've got base level safety. I'll always have a roof. I'll always have financial backup or whatever for basic needs safety, but not in-depth emotional intelligence feedback. And so what I'm hearing when I hear you say that is that, or I guess the guidance that I'm wanting to give you is that when you get to that place, when that happens and the emotional response come on, you're not going to be worried about sharing in the vulnerable parts or insecurities with your siblings or your remaining parent, whichever parent were to go first. Like, because I've been there. And all these insecurities and this sort of micromanaging our own mental experience, all that just drops away and you are just broken down to the raw. I shared, my first husband, Frank, committed suicide in 2020, in January of 2020. And I have always been a person who's, I don't know, can I trust this person? Can I share this thing with them? Do I feel safe? When that happened, I was so broken down by that in the early months of that experience. I was sharing, I just wanted to talk. I wanted to talk to really close friends, family members, my brother, my mother, my father, people that were, people came out of the woodwork too. People I went to college with, people I went to high school with. I hadn't talked to them in 20 years, and I would tell them the whole kit and caboodle of the detailed experience, everything vulnerable that had going on in our relationship and in my life. None of it fucking mattered because I was in the grief. So I think when you actually get there, you're not going to have to worry about any of that.
Okay, so it sounds like you're telling me that you get broken down so much that any of that other stuff just kind of goes away and you're kind of
you're just surviving. It's like a survival response. Like I just need to move through and process this, and you're not going to be as selective about it.
No, there is this other side on it, right, too. Like and this is a part that I can access as well, where I go, well, because of my upbringing, because I felt so safe, this is a part that goes, and I know this is from, working with individuals, that the degree of safety that you had, you do kind of fall back on that, even when people are, this is a part of you always maybe I'll handle it just fine. But it's just that whole thing, right? The idea of family. If you might handle it good, you might not handle it good. That right there is the issue thing that you just blew up.
Yeah, what is that about?
Yeah.
Because, we're all going to lose our parents and our family, our friends in some capacity.
And we're all going to lose ourselves. And what's that going to be?
Yeah, so it's interesting to look at why is it something that you are so scared of.
I think it brings out a little bit of what I wouldn't want to necessarily admit, that there's an element of control for me that perhaps is much stronger than I think it is, right? Where I want to be in control and be able to handle what comes my way. And anytime there's something you can't prepare for, right? So, well, that's not something I can control or prepare for. I can't predict.
You just gotta surrender.
Yeah.
Let the fuck go,
That's the part that's here.
Yeah, because I had two different death experiences within a year of each other, roughly. One that was completely unexpected. There was no time to prepare. It was a suicide. I didn't ever imagine that was going to happen. And so I had that experience, and then my dad died a year later, and I had more than 4 years of preparation and knowing that it was coming, and, how is this going to feel? How is it going to be?
I mean, out of curiosity, obviously, suicide, ever since I've met you, that whole thing, I'll tell you two things about that. Number one, you hear that from someone and you go, that sounds like the most horrific thing a human could go through. And the second thing that immediately happens when you're around youth is, how's this person so light and available and open and doesn't have a dark cloud hanging over it? I think that's what's very surprising about you when I first met you. Actually, it might be the very first thing, because I think you told me that pretty quick. You and I became close really fast.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that. I remember kind of taking my breath away. I remember also reflecting on it and being like, how is she not like a walking zombie?
Mm-hmm. I would have thought the exact same thing. There were stories I heard of people committing suicide and, wives left, children left, whatever, in this way. And I would have thought the same thing, but I never really put a lot of time and energy into imagining what that would be like for me, because I didn't always expect that to be reality. And I think, I met a lot of people at this point who have had someone close in there, whether it's their spouse or their someone in their immediate family commit suicide. You just have a choice. There are two roads. And for me, this came to me early on. I'm either going to be taken down by this and, live that sort of life with like a dark cloud and be depressed and probably ultimately eventually commit suicide or consider it for the rest of my life. Or I can use this as an opportunity to grow and help other people. And that's the choice I made. I didn't want to live that experience of being a dark. Nobody wants to be a dark cloud in a room.
Yeah, and I guess that's the part that I would really love to unpack with you, almost for my own allay of my own fear with this. Because as you know me, I also am a very growth-oriented person, and I do have the same belief you and I share, that the most difficult things in my life have ended up being the best gifts.
Yeah.
But this feels different. And yet, I see you actually made it through. Like, you actually have grown from this. You did actually go through this and turn it into something kind of magical. And by that, I mean, like, you inspire from it. It's not like this Emily tell you. It's just, look who I am and have become from the hardships that I've been through. And it's a very inspirational thing about you, even though it's a very humble, obviously, thing. It's not something you lead with. People have to kind of get to know you a little bit. But I want to know, how about you?
Post bomb a little bit more lately with strangers.
Have you?
Yeah, I did it in the summer. You really did a real part.
Yeah. Seeing the look on your face must be like...
No, so tell me into that question again. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's like, I don't know, these are always hard questions, because you're like, how do you even begin? But I'm like, how do you do? Is there a thing that you did, or did you just like stumble across this? It was like, shit, I didn't know, I just made it out. Or do you feel like there was actually in hindsight
early on, super early on, and I was, fortunate in that it was COVID and my business was shut down, because if which I did immediately before my business was technically shut down. I did immediately move the striding bone. Like, I'm not going to be taken down by this. We're still going to run the business this year. I put all the stuff into place, everything into place, and then got the news later that I actually wasn't going to be able to operate because of the gathering restrictions.
If I can, I want to stop you right there because I want to know, if possible, and I don't want this possible. You said I made a choice. I want to know, like, you're in this place. Like, was it immediate? You're in this deep, dark place, and you're like, fuck this. I'm not going to let this pull me in this direction. Like, was there something you said to yourself? Did you write down? Did you just say to yourself?
I just remember saying it out loud multiple times to friends, to my therapist, I think I contemplated both sides of it, and I had this vision of my future and what it could look like. And there was actually a neighbor of mine whose son had been murdered, and there's a lot of death on that mountain, whose son had been, this is a whole other podcast, son had been murdered and the husband died, and then she kind of self-isolated herself and became an alcoholic and just sat on the side of the mountain, would never come down. She's this sort of grumpy lady, and I didn't want to be that. I mean, her energy was so close to where I was physically, and I just didn't want that for myself. And I knew he wouldn't want that either, period. Maybe it is a part of my striving and my recovering perfectionism, where it's a part of my soul destiny to grow and expand and to learn, and to, maybe it's because I already had some aspect of a spiritual journey going on. I mean, I never experienced the light that I experienced after experiencing that level of darkness, but I still knew that there was light. I still could access it.
So that's interesting. Say more about that. So you came out of it and felt more light than ever. Was it by accident, or was it like, again, a choice that I'm just going to live my life and I'm going to have so much?
Well, I think it's through the experience, of course, the overall process, but even the small moments of extreme darkness and pain, being able to access that, then I would experience that my access to happiness, love, compassion, empathy became much greater and much more expanded, because I had so much more appreciation for every moment and every relationship and all the people that had shown up in my life. I had just a greater capacity to experience the positive aspects of life after experiencing such a horrible thing.
This part I can get with a little bit, because as you know, like recently, my mother had a heart attack. My dad had a stroke before that. My brother had a near-death car accident. My brother-in-law's brother had a stroke, like all within several months. And I will, surprisingly,
I think it's
surprisingly, gratitude did come out of it. I still got the year. It was still okay.
There's some sort of organic human nature that, you can't have working without the other. It is just polarity. And I watched my dad go in and out of, he had cancer. They gave him 6 months. And then he would make it through, beat it, go into remission. And I watched his emotional experience, and Wing would have gratitude, appreciation after, basically being on step fed, almost dying, and then surviving. And then after a certain amount of time to the past, he would lose access to that gratitude and the light, and then kind of take it back down again. So I watched his cycle in that in the years before the husband died. I mean, I would say to you that you can take it within yourself to see, although it will be the most negative, dark thing that you experience in your life, it is also going to be your greatest teacher, your greatest access point, if you choose to engage.
Yeah. It's really hard, because when I talk about my life, I feel like what I've been through, it's been like a hangman. Right, like I got a hangman. You got like your legs chopped out from under.
But I was a hangnail life too before that. Like, I hadn't had any crazy death experience. Didn't really have anything like that. I mean, my grandfather died. He was 82. He had been smoking since he was 12 years old. I was in 5th grade, but it was more of an organic, life cycle death. I didn't have any traumatic death experience or grief experience or loss leading up to that event. So I had no training. You have way more training than I do. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah, sometimes the training is more, it's theoretical stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, and then to experience it. But it does just contemplating it. Like I have a tattoo that says Memento Mori on my chest. So it's not like I think a lot about death. I see it every morning.
Yeah.
Memento Mori is Latin for remember death, sort of Stoic thing. So I see it every single morning,
Yeah.
but I think that it's all so theoretical and out there. Whereas when I talk to you, hear you talk about it, I'm like, oh, this is real palpable.
Yeah, and even for me, I'm still contemplating the fact that I had lost some level of access to the viewpoint on death that I had in those early days, early months, even the first year after. It is more distant for me. So there is some piece of, gratitude that I've lost and the appreciation for the life that I have to continually redirect or remind myself of.
You know what? I'll back with you a little bit because you have some interesting beliefs after death.
Hmm.
And I'll admit this to you. I think you know this to me, but I'll admit it to the people listening to this. Is that for a long time I was agnostic, all leaning atheist, right?
Me too.
Whereas basically like, what I believed was you die and everything just goes black. Just like when you get anesthesia. My thought was, how's it any different than anesthesia? You just blacked out. And to be honest with you, that was really comforting to me. Like I loved the idea of just not being here. And I know that some people that scares them, but that's actually really comfortable to me. It's almost like you just go to sleep, you're not aware, you're just gone. That was very comfortable to me. But as I've sort of had different experiences, especially coming to Asheville, and delving deep into meditation and psychedelics and really into the philosophy of this, I've become more of a philosophical idealist where I believe there is something else. Like I'm not a theist, right? So I don't believe of a man in the sky is anthropomorphic God, but I do believe there's this creative energy we perhaps go back to. You know what's funny, Kelly? That scares me. I liked my old belief way better. That was much more comforting. But you actually are someone I talked to as a whole. You believe in incarnation. You believe that something else happens, and I'm wondering if you want to talk about that because I think you're one of the first people as I started shifting this belief that was like, well, here's how I see it. It's not that I had read about all these spiritual traditions because I'm very much into philosophy, so I was schooled in it in my head. I just saw it as fairy tale stuff. Now I see it as perhaps real.
Yeah, and as I'm listening to you say that, I'm wondering, what was my belief before I experienced all this traumatic death experience? But so that experience has really propelled me into trying to do both what I believe to be true. I always have been interested in religion and started researching religion early on, just trying to answer some of these basic questions in the beginning of my spiritual journey. I did never believe in a traditional heaven and hell scenario. I've always believed in reincarnation. I have a lot of Buddhist and Hindu influence in my belief system, but after experiencing grief and death in the way that I have and living in Nashville, my viewpoint has evolved a little bit. I believe a lot more and I have a much clearer understanding in spiritual karma and physical karma that we're born into our lives with, spiritual and physical goals that we're born into our lives with. Essentially, the language means lessons that we come into this life to learn, and that essentially we will continue to be in these repeated patterns, whether it's a relationship pattern, whatever it is, until we hack the issue. Basically, we'll keep being reborn with this set of issues until we move through it. Either on a spiritual level, a physical level, and it's a part of our soul's destiny, and journey through lifetimes to learn these lessons, all within a goal and experience to, achieve our closest expression of enlightenment as a energetic being. And with the experience of having my husband die, I have walked a little in the shamanic traditions and explored what that energy space felt like. I have wondered about psychic abilities. I just remember early on, um, spending a lot of time in my shower talking to him and wondering, I don't know what it was about the shower. It was like this quiet, sacred came rumble level and very much in my intimate self and wondering, can he hear me? Is he here? Can I feel him? And I still have questions around that. I mean, I feel more clear and I feel more connected with it, but navigating and trying to decode and put theory and philosophy to how exactly that system works, I don't know the exact answer, but I do believe that we can feel people's presence, and I do believe that we can communicate across different realms. I do believe that when a soul passes, there is a time period, especially if it's in turmoil or sudden, where they hang around in this realm. And I don't want to get like into physics and whatnot, quantum physics, but this all is connected. And I believe there has to be some level of emotional and spiritual contentment and closure to be able to go to the other side. And I don't want to take us too far off, but I could talk a little bit about some of the work that I have friends telling me that my late husband is doing in the world of shamanic traditions on the other side, as they might describe it.
Well, I want you to go wherever you want to go because for me, it's just fascinating to hear. Like my belief systems around this have evolved as well. Mm-hmm. But being an evidence-based person, right? Like the first thing I do was go, well, we're as humans, we are masters meaning-making machines. Mm-hmm. And so like this, I just go, we make meaning out of a lot of things to make sense. We make meaning to make sense. And there's lots of different traditions that make meaning to make sense. But there's also, I feel like I've had some real world experiences now where I can't explain certain things around it. For example, I was on an LSD journey. Of course, it usually involves, I had what would be, someone might call past life regression. And as someone who's more scientifically inclined, I go, well, A, that could have just been a dream thing that I conjured up. B, how do I know it was my life? I could have just been tapping into someone else's life. And C, maybe it was my life. But I will say this, it had a profound impact on squaring. Like it felt like whatever that process that I went through, reliving that dream that I conjured or that life that I entered were my past life, it had direct karmic consequences for this life. And it's so real in me that when I bring it up, I will get emotional, bringing back up this experience. Yeah. So I don't know what that means, but maybe some experiences that you can have can explain some of that.
Well, if you talk a little bit just from a physiological standpoint, it is an energetic imprint, clearly. Like you are accessing an energy, whether or not that's your exact experience or a version of your soul or someone that your soul's was connected to experience. There is an energetic imprint in your reality that's connected to that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to access it.
Or feel such emotional charge around it.
Exactly. I don't want to go. I'm thinking about psychedelics and the different realms and realities that we can tap in.
Only to say, I will say, it's the thing that first got me excited about, or can't say interested in, perhaps doing psychedelics. Because I was never someone who would ever venture down that. Was a book I read that basically talking about the idea. A lot of people have heard his quote, either he's the psychedelic space, but it truly that if you die before you die, you don't have to die when you die. And that was really an interesting thing because I got the idea that people who have done psychedelics have these ego dissolution experiences. Yeah. And I did have that on ayahuasca. I had it with, and it's not a fun experience from my point of view, but it is an experience that once you have it, it does kind of fundamentally change the way you see these things.
Exactly. Yeah. It is sort of, for me, the experience of looking down at a grain of dirt or fleck of dirt and seeing the universe. It takes me back to childhood, really. What was that movie? you were a kid, maybe you were a teenager. Honey, I Shrunk the Kid, that's what it is.
Oh yeah, I saw it.
And it's this universe, in the blazing grass. And, this is something that I really can access when I travel too. Just this perspective of how small our energetic experience is and this much greater, larger scheme of things. Even this soul journey and this time and age in this lifetime. I think looking at death and looking at grief, it's a really helpful way to recognize that these things, these issues, these levels of grief are small in the imprint of a greater scheme of things, even our own individual journey.
I'm curious when you were going through this, like especially with your husband. I'm wondering, did you ever have, like, I imagine some of the things that might come up for me, which you all might find silly, but I want to ask. Like, I can imagine I'd be like, well, I want to see if they're here, but I'd also be scared, like, the ghost showed up in my room, like, or, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like this wanting and this fear where you get in this place where, like, I'm not sure if they're here, did it freak you out, or just
It's freaking out more now than it did then. But I always would ask those questions, like, show me a sign, like you see little girls do, or whatever. Silly movies back in the day. And what I've come to learn and that I've seen is common across multiple different spiritual traditions is it's not so literal and it's not so tangible. It's more when a feeling comes over you or a thought crosses your mind or a vision comes, that is how we're connected and that is how we see and feel them. It is not like, a cheesy 80s movie where the ghost stands in the corner, all of a sudden you see them, or you say, move the lamp or turn the light off, and then they do, and you say, oh, they're here. It's not like that. But it is this very nuanced, easy, simple, it's just a thought, and it's having faith in a thought.
So it sounds like you can have these internal experiences at times when someone goes that seem separate and apart from just your thought, and they're present within you again.
Well, it would be their energetic presence here. Just like if you talk to a psychic and they call in access to, which they always make sure to call in beings of light and positive energetics, not anything dark. They call that in. And what I've learned about it is all it is just ideas or thoughts, what they're asking you questions about that are crossing their mind. And sometimes there's a visual aspect to it, but that's all that it is. They're just tapping and tuning farther into that.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem so scary.
No, it's just because the energetic imprint and the existence is still out there in the plane. And you could call that soul, the energetic imprint. We can still access energy anywhere in our universe.
I oftentimes think of that, we walk into certain rooms or even when people talk about things like haunted houses or whatever, I oftentimes think about those are just exactly what you said, energetic imprints about what may have gone down there, but not necessarily an entity with agency. Like I think when we hear, as humans, we hear like bump in the night or something, it kept us alive. So we immediately go, it must be something with agency. But sometimes you're right. I think I usually do go, okay, that's just an energetic imprint of something that existed, but not necessarily something with agency. That's why like horror movies and stuff like that typically don't interest me because I don't believe in the agency of that. But I am interested in sort of paranormal stuff where it's like, okay, there's an energetic here that definitely can influence you. Just don't know about like, a ghost throwing a cup at you.
I don't know about tangible objects being moved. I don't have an access to that in my research, like what my answer to that is.
Yeah, and I guess unless you experience
positive light energy.
Or hearing voices, but again, you work in the psychology field. There's plenty of people who like schizophrenics hear voices all the time. Schizophrenics see people. So I often wonder to myself, I'm like, are they actually hearing things that are there, or not.
Is
Right?
it just a projection of your own?
So the brain can't do really interesting, strange stuff.
So take psychedelics and you understand what the right can do, and that's if it maybe being schizophrenic, you know. But to take it back to grief and death and dying in that way, I mean, do you feel more comfortable with the idea, or do you have other questions?
Yeah, I don't feel any more comfortable, to be honest with you, other than I feel it's nice to, I feel like more conversations like this would maybe allay some of my concerns. I have found myself lately, and I don't know if it's just being, turning 50 and dealing with, my own mortality. Something happens, you start seeing yourself different. All of a sudden, you start seeing friends. Like I've had, friends who pass away. I've had friends who are relatively young and have to go for heart surgery, just different things you start seeing. And you go, okay, like I've lived more life than I'm gonna live at 51 and all, and all of this, I think, adds up. It is a bit unsettling, and so I don't know. I think I have to sit with this. Like I think I have to sit with a conversation like this for a while and think about this and and meditate on it. If I meditate on it, like when I say that, I mean when I go into my meditations, I will bring in a memory or a thought, and I will just meditate on that memory, that thought, or that. Sometimes I even do negative visualization to prime myself to prepare for something. Like I used to visualize if my business collapsing or whatever, just so I can see myself handling it. But I can see myself revisiting this conversation in a meditation.
Maybe it's helpful. I witnessed my dad pass on his deathbed naturally in my parents' home.
Saw in his last breaths.
I literally watched him hitting his fight. I watched in his eyes as we offered him encouragement, and he was no longer really in his physical body, but his soul and his spirit was still there. And we encouraged him, told him we're okay, well, we're safe, and we've got this. You can let go, you can let go. And I watched him leave. And that was probably, I hadn't given birth at that point. That was probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life. So I also have a lot of friends who've experienced death in different ways and have been so fascinated and moved by it that they become death doulas, which has evolved into many other things. We have this beautiful center here in Asheville called the Conscious Center of Living and Dying, sort of a new embracing community of approaching death in different ways. And they're also holding space for different types of death ceremony, which is a beautiful place. But I wonder what it would be like for you to experience a death that you're not emotionally attached to, and how that might change your perspective on it as we prepare.
I will share one thought with you that came up for me ways that is interesting, and maybe you have comments on it. My friend, who was one of my first accountants, became a good friend of mine, and he never went to the doctor. He was probably 15 years older than me, and he collapsed in his kitchen one morning in pain, came to me, and he was like, I don't go see doctors. And I said, well, let me give you an exam. So I did an exam on him. His liver was, supposed to be able to find the liver up in the rib cage. His liver was down here. So I was like, you need to go and get yourself to the hospital or whatever. Anyway, he was there about 3 days later, and I went and visited him in the hospital. And so this part is hard because I remember him crying, and it was a cry, and maybe this is why I'm a little bit afraid.
Yeah.
It was a cry of such desperation and fear and anguish that I remember leaving there, and I could hear him as I'm walking down the hall away from his room. I could hear him crying. And I remember thinking to myself, when I die, I don't ever want to die that way. I want to die with a smile on my face, or whoever watches me die, I want them to be less afraid of dying. But I think in that, it's a beautiful thought, but I also think in that, invocation that I created for myself, maybe I created fear, and I'm going to have to live up to that and not allow myself just to die.
Right, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
And you just don't know. It's a process of surrender and let go. And yeah, sometimes you have more time to prepare and fully process. Okay, it's really here. I'm a death. I'm gonna die. It could be a couple of months. It could be a year. I have this thing. This is likely going to be the thing that takes me down. And then there's the other experience of something sudden happening. But I would argue, say, if you were in his shoes, not to criticize him in any way, but there is a level of attunement with oneself and their physical body where they know somebody is off. And if you're ignoring, so you're very attuned to your body. I would say I too. You're gonna get exactly what you need in your death process, and that's all it is. Kind of going back to the Tao. Trust the process. This is all in alignment with your soul's destiny of what you need to learn, what you haven't learned in other lives, and this is an opportunity to propel yourself to the next level in your hologram, as you would say.
Yeah. And I will say one really interesting piece that I think I will take of this. I have the experience of going through really tough times with business, let's say, or heartbreak or different things like that. And I do know when you said this early, I do know I love gratitude. And when I'm able to do that, when I'm able to be great, graceful in the moment and present with what I'm feeling, it does help you transcend. And I'm wondering, after hearing you say this, that maybe I already have some of the tools. So maybe I just need to lead into that. Hearing you say that, I know how to do that. I've done that, I'll do it for a couple of times. So maybe it's just leading into that presence, being fully present with my Lord and my Father, if I'm able to when it has, and also be fully present and in gratitude with myself. So maybe that's the secret.
Death is a rite of passage, is it not? Birth is a rite of passage for the being born, and also the being facilitating the birth. And so to take advantage of all the time that you have with yourself and with your family, and know that you've given it everything that you could. That's all that you can do now. And then you can lean in to celebrating that they're basically just closing a chapter and starting another.
Yeah.
In their spiritual journey, whatever that looks like for them, including you.
Yeah, another memory came to me. My father, when I first was learning to drive, he drove me to get my driver's license.
Yeah.
And he's like, you scared? You nervous? And I was like, yeah, a little. And he's like, Jade, he goes, everybody does this. Like, everybody. He goes, you mean to tell me you can't do this too? And I remember, but now I'm thinking, it's a great way to look at that. I was like, no humans, 100% fatality rate. It's like,
it's not
everyone does it. Yeah, everyone does it. So what makes us think we are not going to do it just fine?
And all we can do is maintain, we're evaluating our own death, is looking at sort of deathbed perspective. What am I doing with my life right now? Who do I love? How am I treating myself? How am I treating other people? Am I going to feel good about this when I lay down my deathbed? As long as you live your life that way, then you're not going to be sad or crying, as long as you're at peace with all your actions.
This is definitely something I think you and I totally vibe with.
Yeah.
I very much do live my life, and more and more, the more I get in touch with it, the better it gets. I do treat people and live my life in a way I'm like, I want them proud of who I am.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. I love this conversation.
I liked it.